So now, Donna, we're going to get into talking about some tools, but we want to also let you know that we're not going to go through the process of telling you which tools to use. One of the things that we like to do during this tool sections, and as a classroom teacher, what you want to be thinking about is if the student already has a particular device, does it have this feature built in? Is it a feature that is required for the student in order to access their content? So when we start to take a look at tools, we don't want to be tool driven. We want to make sure that what we're doing with the tools is that we always first, as you'll see on the slide, consider the individuals, what their needs, what are those tasks, what are their abilities, what are their expectations when it comes to implementing accessible instructional materials. From there, after we have done the consideration of what their abilities are and their needs and their expectations, then we can start to match the technology piece. You know, what is the interface? What is the input that they need? How do they process it? How do they process it auditorily? How do they process it visually? What is the output of that particular item? Do they have to be able to print their notes in a classroom setting? Or what are some of the other properties of the technology that we need to consider? And so we're going to get into these when we talk about the tools. With the functionality and version, obviously, if we're talking about portability, you know, the size and the weight, you know, can it easily go from one place to the next? How are the files stored? Are they, you know, transferred utilizing CDs, DVDs? Is it memory cards that they're going to use, USB, you know, memory sticks, you know, and that's going to have an impact, especially when we think about the classroom and the teachers who might be using supplemental material, and then all of a sudden they bring something that might not currently be in an accessible format. Can they get it converted quick enough so that the student then can get access? And how will the student get that to their device? We're also then taking a look at how the student is going to input their information. So whether or not, if they're utilizing the device, if there's an on-screen keyboard for them that they can access information, or if they're doing Brailling, as Donna has taught me, that it could be the 6-key entering in the keyboarding aspect, or whether or not the keyboard layout might be different. Does the student need the layout in alphabetical order in order to find it? Does it need to be in frequency of use? Does it need to be in the typical QWERTY, the QWERTY layout? And then also we want to take a look at how does information get inputted. As I had mentioned earlier that, well, I myself as a classroom teacher, probably 50% of the material that I was utilizing did not fall into the area of textbooks or core related material. It was a lot of supplemental material. So I need to think about how can I quickly provide access to those students. And so does it have the capability to scan material in or take an image of it and convert it into more of an accessible format? And then as we get to the area of using the internet and our students are doing more and more research, can it read the web live? There's some companies that have chosen to actually leave the internet feature out of their devices because of possible distractibility. Other input features that we want to be aware of is just the type of file formats that it can open. Can it open up text files, rich text files? Adobe PDF files if they haven't been locked out of those particular file formats. Can it read DAISY files, which is a format that we're seeing initially more focused with individuals with the visual impairments, but utilizing now with individuals, you know, that struggle just with the reading process and have that audio aspect. Braille ready file formats, or whether or not it's going to be MP3 players, and or whether or not they're going to be utilizing AVI files, which is a Microsoft interface format. The other thing that you want to think about within a document is how does an individual navigate within their tool? If it's an audio only file, can I easily go from section to section? How do I go from page to page if the teacher's going to say, I want everybody on page 53 now? Somebody that's in an audio only, can they jump to that particular section? Or are they going to be fast forwarding, rewinding, and trying to locate their areas? Some of the other navigation tools that we may look at is the use of bookmarking. So if I went through and bookmarked my headings, I can also use that then when it comes to one of the reading strategies, which we'll talk about later. Some other visual presentation that we might want to think about in the area of the reading features again, is does the student have access to being able to view the entire page, or being able to see where they are on the page so that they know how much more that they have to actually read before they get to the end of the page and go on to the next section? Can there be some visual tracking support? So can it highlight either the word, or can it highlight in chunks, sentences, or paragraphs to be able to help the student visually stay engaged in that? Can there be visual presentation changes in the area of color? We don't always, do a good job as individuals reading black text in a white background. That might be very harsh, and for some students, even fatiguing when they're looking at the amount of text throughout the day. And so can we essentially do the electronic version of a colored overlay on top of it to change that perceptual feedback? And then, as Donna had talked a little bit about the size of the text, many of us benefit from the use of larger font as we are reading material, and some of our students also prefer to have that larger to be able to keep in track with what they're listening to. And then the last part is the reverse. Rather than highlighting the unit that's actually being read, masking out the material so it's grayed out what I'm currently not covering, and so my visual focus is going to be on that text.
Thanks, Scott, for sharing all those aspects. So I thought I would also add to some aspects of print reading in regards to considerations for students who have low vision. So what we also think about is viewing capabilities of tools for near or distance. For example, you see in this slide a photo of a tool that enables print to be magnified at a near distance, and also a camera then that you can focus for distance features to read at a distance. And so another important aspect for reading and writing and viewing print is in the area of math content, because we want to look at tools that provide accuracy in looking at numbers and symbols for students. And then we also think about, again, reading and viewing graphics for students with low vision. And we want to make sure that they're accurately getting content in illustrations, in charts, in graphs, and maps.
Some of the other reading features that we want to think about is that auditory presentation of materials. I had mentioned earlier at the beginning of the session about whether or not it was going to be a digitized voice or a synthesized voice. But in the area, if you're utilizing synthesized voice, can you change the actual synthesizer? So maybe at one time, and each of us process things better at different pitches. And so some people might prefer a male's voice, some might prefer a female's voice. Some individuals that are on the autism spectrum disorder, I found that they don't like the more human quality voice, that they may like, a little bit more of the robotic kind of predictive voices. Also, when we take a look at the reading, we're also looking at the reading unit. And what we're referring to here in the reading unit is that, do I push the play button and I start listening to my text, and it's going to keep going whether or not I'm interacting with it or listening to it or not? Or can I put it into read by sentence or read by paragraph? So maybe if I'm in the context of listening to a chapter in my textbook, I want to have that setting as read by paragraph, so I get to the end of the paragraph and I can make a conscious decision. Do I need to go back and listen to it again, or am I ready to go on to the next paragraph? However, if I'm utilizing it for test taking, I might not want it to read all of the exam questions. So then I might want to have it more of a self-paced by sentence, so I can be a little bit more engaged in that process. And then the other part that we take a look at with the auditory presentations, again, is just, whether or not the locations of those reading controls are easy to get to. Can I easily speed it up, slow it down within the reading, or do I need to go deep into a dialog box in order to access those changes?
Mm-hmm. So there are some reading and writing features around Braille presentations that I think are helpful to think about. So we've talked about contracted and uncontracted Braille, and so it's important to know about the tool, and can you do the codes and see the Braille in both contracted and uncontracted. And then what kind of Braille codes is the tool using to present information to students? For example, is it the literary Braille code? Is it the computer Braille code? And can a tool use some aspects of the music Braille code? And then does the tool provide refreshable Braille? And what is the display size of that refreshable Braille? For example, is it an 18-cell refreshable Braille display or a 32-cell refreshable Braille display? And also then, does the tool provide for hard copy Braille? So it's important to know about all those aspects. So some other aspects of the Braille presentation that are important to think about is how it integrates with other output features. So for example, can the Braille be used in combination with speech, and does the tool provide for that? And does the tool also provide translation aspects from Braille to print or print to Braille? And those are important aspects when we look at communication with people who do not use Braille. And then another important aspect of tools is to thinking about connectivity with other devices. For example, do the tools connect with a print printer or a Braille embosser to provide hard copy Braille? Does the tool connect with a print viewer, especially if you're using a Braille tool, so that a person who does not know Braille has access to what the student is reading and writing? So we think about a display or an LCD display or a computer display that does provide access to the Braille in a print format. And then we think about connectivity with computers and laptops and the ability to download information to them. And we think about connectivity to scanners, because that's an important way to input information into an electronic tool. So then we also look at connectivity with other devices that provide for multimedia integration of tools. So for example, with media players and a recorder.
That's good information, Donna, actually, as you were talking about this particular slide, and I view it so much more than also just the visual aspect, because our students, again, who just struggle with reading and they need to turn in their notes that they've been taking, documenting that they've been interacting with it, they need to interface with the printer. They might need to interface with that scanner in order to get access to the material as well. And then one of the other things that we also want to take a look at is that implementation of the study skills. The classroom teacher really needs to think about what types of study skills they're implementing in their classroom, because it's going to have an impact whether or not the student can participate in the class the same way that all the other students are. Do they have the capability to electronically highlight the text and actually extract the text so that they have their notes, so that they don't have to type everything over from scratch or write everything from scratch? Can they create a new file with that information, so when it comes to previewing it and studying it for an exam, I don't have to go through the entire document again. I can just listen to the notes that I've extracted. Some of the other study skill features that we take a look at is the word support, through the use of dictionaries. If it's a student who might have issues with decoding, they might want to use the ability to be able to have a word pronounced by syllables, and or accessing, for some students, getting the definition of a word doesn't necessarily help them understand the meaning, because it's a lot of additional language bombardment that a number of individuals that I work with use the thesaurus or the synonyms features in order to be able to figure out what that particular word means.